Powerland. Bienvenida a tu comunidad de empoderamiento, donde Alice somos todas. En este espacio podrás crecer y aprender para que tu sueño profesional, empresarial o de emprendimiento se convierta en realidad. Somos Silvia Lucero
e Indira Villegas, y junto con invitadas especiales estaremos contigo todos los martes, brindándote tips y herramientas para que puedas crecer en tu negocio, dar el siguiente paso en tu carrera profesional o simplemente reinventarte y así maximizar ese gran potencial que llevas dentro. Gracias por acompañarnos hoy martes 12 de enero. Hoy contamos con la participación de un TED Talk speaker de talla internacional. Estamos felices de tener con nosotros a Matt Friedman. Matt tiene más de 30 años de experiencia en temas de cooperación y desarrollo internacional y ha trabajado para Naciones Unidas, así como para la Agencia de Desarrollo Internacional del Gobierno de los Estados Unidos. Matt es considerado y ha sido galardonado como orador inspiracional, ya que sus presentaciones han cambiado muchas vidas. Debido a que Matt no habla español, a partir de ahora cambiaré al inglés para poder darle la bienvenida como él se merece y hacer su entrevista. Matt, it is our pleasure that you have accepted our invite. We are so happy and excited to have you in this space. Thank you so much for taking the time because we know you are a very busy person. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
So, let's start with the first question. How can storytelling help a businesswoman to sell her product or a professional to promote her career?
Storytelling is a very effective way of communicating information. Now, all of us on this call have gone to conferences and workshops and events where somebody puts up a PowerPoint slide that has 10 or 12 bullets on it, and they go through the various bullets. And probably by the second or third slide, we're beginning to tune out. Why? Because the information is fragmented, it's random, it's a series of factual information, and it's not tied to the way we as human beings communicate. Storytelling tends to take information and package it in a format that is understandable. We as human beings, when we are conveying what it is that we did during the day, tell stories. Much of the way we communicate with each other is through storytelling. And so by using stories as a means of kind of trying to get a message across, we're using a natural communication format. Stories tend to be a lot more memorable because it ties all the various pieces of the information together in the chronological presentation that's being made. And as a result of it being more interesting, and as a result of us kind of listening to what's happening, it raises expectations. It draws us into the discussion. We want to hear what the story ending is going to be. And as a result of that, it helps us to really get our message across to people.
Very interesting and helpful. So, what are the critical elements that storytelling must include?
Well, basically what a story should include is the basic information that you want to convey as part of a message. And so the way I tell stories is I start off with a description of a personal experience that I've had, and I go into the details. And through the storytelling, I eventually get to a point where at the end of the story, which could be 2, 3, 4 minutes long, I convey a message that has the audience kind of shaking their head saying, aha, I understand, I see what you mean by that. So what I tend to do is to make sure that my stories are personal and based on my own experience, because by having a personal story, it gives me credibility. It helps people to understand that I know what I'm talking about because it's directly related to me. The second thing is it's really important to make sure that our stories are interesting. If it's a series of information that you're presenting that has no interest, it really you'll lose the audience with that as well. So what I tend to do when I'm coming up with a new story is I'll try it out on a small audience. I'll try it out on my friends and my colleagues to see, did my story convey the information that I needed to convey? And if that works, then I integrate it into my presentation. And the last thing is that all of my stories basically end with a point that I'm trying to make. It's not a story just for the sake of having a story, at the end of it, I make a point, and because the audience is drawn into the story, they walk away with what that point really is.
Wow, I love that. So, besides, like telling them a personal story, do you think the tone of voice, the hands-on use, it's also very helpful or not necessarily?
Yeah, there are in the presentation that I'll be doing, I talk about some of the things that we have to include in a story. For example, pauses. Now, a lot of people, when they're doing public speaking, think that there can't be a pause at all. And it's just the opposite. What you really want to do as part of your presentation is to raise expectations, and pauses do this. For example, if I tell this very short story, when I was living and working in Bangladesh, I worked with a group that was trying to rescue infants, 2-year-old boys who were being trafficked from Bangladesh to the Middle East. Now imagine that, 2-year-old boys. What would you do with a 2-year-old boy? Well, a 2-year-old boy in the Middle East is put on a camel and forced to race, and they use them because they are lightweight. If the boy makes it to age 5, many of them don't, you often have a situation where they're gaining weight, they're slowing the camels down, and they throw them out on the street. So the example that I just gave there, I paused. And what you want is a pause that basically allows the audience to catch up with where you are. So the tone of your voice, the pauses, the way you make a presentation is as important as the message. And we will talk about that in the presentation that I offer.
Great. And don't miss the talk that we're going to have with Matt on January 14. So moving forward, our next question is about cultural difference. Do you think cultural difference influence storytelling? And which factors should we consider?
Yeah, I think it goes beyond cultural differences. It goes down to what does the audience know? Is it mostly women? Is it men? Are they educated? When I worked for the United Nations, I did talks among the general population. I did talks among government officials, the private sector, academics. Each of those particular audiences required a different type of information. And so it's extremely important to kind of adjust your talk to the audience that you're giving it to. Because if you don't, and for example, if I give a very technical talk about human trafficking, which I often do, to the general public, and they don't understand the terms of the approaches that I'm getting into with my stories, I'll lose the audience. There are also cultural differences in the way you present information. There are political sensitivities sometimes that have to be taken into consideration. So it's really important to understand your audience and to take that into consideration when you are developing the message and the storytelling approach you're going to use.
Sounds very interesting. And thank you so much for clarifying that. Well, our last question is related with tips that you could provide to the audience so they can make compelling storytelling in their business or professional careers.
Yeah, there are actually 4 areas that I'll be talking on. And the first one is the importance of public speaking. Now, in certain places around the world, North America, for example, for whatever reason, people are afraid of public speaking. They become fearful. They get shy in front of audiences. It's extremely important if you want your business to move forward, if you want to convey your message, to learn to get over that. And in my own case, I had a tremendous fear of public speaking about 15 years ago. It had something to do with an event that happened when I was a small child. And it put me off to public speaking. And every time I was about to get up and do public speaking, I was very fearful. But because of the work I did, I recognized that I had to get over that. And so I just started doing one event after another, and eventually I got to a point where I no longer had that fear. In fact, I enjoyed being in front of an audience. And so ensuring that you understand the importance of public speaking and actually allow yourself to do it is the first point. The second one is when you're telling stories, it's important to tell stories based on our own personal experience. We all have stories of successes and failures and things that happen that allow us to learn things. And everyone in the audience has similar types of experiences. So using your own personal experience will allow them to relate and resonate with the message you're trying to get across. As I mentioned, practice is extremely important. It's important not to just get up there and to wing it. It's really important to practice in front of a mirror or practice with your spouse or with a friend so that you are able to know that the points you're getting across are important. And lastly, always have a clear message. Whenever I'm going to come up with a speech or a presentation, I have in my mind, what's the point that I want to get across in this 20 minutes or 30 minutes or 40 minutes, whatever the duration of time is, and how do I use my stories to achieve that endpoint?
Thank you so much for sharing with us your personal story. This is very helpful. And any question that our audience may have, please don't miss our talk with Matt on January 14. And Matt, again, thank you so much for being with us. We are so happy and thankful because this podcast is going to be very useful. Thank you so much, Matt.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I look forward to the event.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Si por el idioma hay algo que no te quedó claro, en nuestras notas del episodio encontrarás la traducción. De igual manera, te invitamos a que este jueves 14 de enero a las 19 horas de Ciudad de México nos acompañes, ya que Matt nos dará una plática donde nos proporcionará tips sobre cómo transmitir nuestro mensaje a través del storytelling. No te pierdas nuestro próximo episodio, ya que Silvia nos compartirá algunos tips para que perdamos el miedo a reinventarnos.
Si hay algún tema en particular que te gustaría que discutiéramos en este espacio o si tienes preguntas, escríbenos en nuestras redes sociales en Instagram, Facebook y Twitter o envíalas a nuestro correo electrónico.
Te esperamos el próximo martes.